The Lake of Pale Hands extended long edition inspired by real drownings and eerie sightings around Lake Motosu. Japan's slow-burn dread cinematic horror sensory detail. Lake Motosu was still that morning. Not calm, not peaceful. Still in a way that felt unnatural, like the water wasn't water at all, but a sheet of black glass laid across the earth. The surface reflected the mountains like a perfect mirror, sharp enough to look unreal, as if the lake had frozen without turning to ice. A thin mist hovered just above it. It didn't drift like normal fog. It moved in slow spirals, curling in deliberate patterns, as if something beneath the surface was breathing, stirring the air upward in quiet pulses. The mountains surrounding the lake stood tall and dark, their reflections stretching across the water like shadows reaching toward the shore. In the early morning light, the lake looked bottomless, its shallows swallowed by a murky darkness that hid everything beneath, and the forest lining the shoreline was silent, too silent. Branches hung heavy with dew, motionless, as though the trees were holding their breath. Not a single bird called, no insects buzzed, even the wind refused to enter the space. The world felt paused, waiting. A wooden dock stretched into the lake, old and weather-worn. Its planks were damped from the mist, darkened by years of rain. The boards creaked faintly under their own weight, groaning softly with each subtle shift in temperature. At the edge of the dock, a small boat rocked gently. But the movement wasn't caused by waves. There were no waves. The boat swayed as if something invisible brushed against it from below. The water around the dock remained perfectly smooth, until the first ripple appeared. Small, gentle, barely noticeable. A thin circle formed near the dock's shadow and spread outward in perfect rings. It didn't look like something had fallen into the lake. It looked like something had risen beneath it. The water darkened in that spot. A patch of shadow stretched outward, expanding like ink bleeding into paper. The lake's mirror reflection warped, trembling slightly, as though the surface itself had become thin. Then another ripple, and another, slow, measured, like footsteps. The mist thickened, curled lower, gathering around the dock, creeping between the posts and wrapping around the boat's ropes like pale fingers. The air turned cold enough to sting the skin. The lake remained silent, no splashes, no bubbling. Just ripples spreading in slow circles, and then something pale appeared beneath the surface. At first, it was only a blur, a vague shape drifting in the darkness, almost invisible. But as it rose closer, its outline sharpened. A hand, white and swollen, skin bloated from long submersion, stretched tight and waxy, nearly translucent. Veins faintly visible beneath the surface like cracks in ice. The fingernails were dark blackened, jagged, broken. The hand floated upward slowly. Not drifting like something dead, moving like something alive. It reached the surface, pressing against it from below. The water bulged upward around the fingertips like a thin membrane, stretching to hold it back. For a moment, the lake resisted. Then the hand pushed harder. The surface warped, the fingertips broke through, and water slid off the pale flesh in thin, silent sheets. More shapes rose. 1, 2, 5, 10 hands emerged in different places around the dock, all pressing upward from below like bodies trapped beneath glass. Their fingers flattened against the surface, nails scraping faintly, creating tiny ripples that spread outward and collided. Then, without warning, the lake exhaled. Dozens of hands burst through the surface at once. The water churned violently, sending ripples racing outward in every direction. Pale arms rose, wrists twisting, fingers flexing as if testing the air. Some hands clawed at the dock's wooden posts. Wet fingers wrapped around the aged planks, leaving dark streaks of brackish water behind them. Others reached blindly upward, groping at empty air like drowning victims searching for anything to hold onto. But none of them made a sound. No splashing, no gasps, no screams, only silence. And that silence was worse than any noise. The mist coiled tighter around the lake, drawn toward the hands as if pulled by magnetism. It wrapped around wrists and forearms, forming pale tendrils that clung like wet cloth. Their hands rose higher, and beneath the surface, shadows gathered. Dark shapes drifted upward, slow and deliberate, circling like predators. Then faces began to form under the water. Not clear at first, just warped outlines, but they became sharper as they pressed closer to the surface. Pale foreheads, hollow eye sockets, eyes that stared upward without blinking, mouths opening slowly, closing again, as if trying to breathe in water that refused to let them live. Bubbles rose from their lips in slow streams, twisting upward like spirits escaping through cracks. The faces looked distorted by the water, but the expressions were unmistakable. Fear, pain, desperation, and something else. Something older, something hungry. The hands writhed. Some clutched each other, fingers intertwining tightly like bodies sinking together. Others snapped toward the dock in jerky, unnatural motions, joints bending wrong, wrists twisting too far. One hand slapped against the side of the moored boat. It hit the wood with a dull, wet sound, and when it pulled away, it left a stain, a perfect handprint, pale and dark at the same time, as if the wood itself had been burned by the touch. Water seeped from the edges of the print slowly, dripping down the side of the boat. The drips fell in a rhythm, 1, 2, 3. Each drop echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. The lake seemed to darken further, and then, the water began to swell. A deep vibration rolled through the lake, like thunder trapped underwater. The dock trembled, the boat rocked harder, waves pushed against the shoreline in heavy, rhythmic pulses, not random waves, but steady, deliberate ones, like a heartbeat. The lake wasn't moving like water, it was moving like something alive. The mist thickened again, spreading outward in a wide circle, and the hands stopped moving. All of them, frozen mid-ridge. The ripples ceased instantly. The waves vanished. The lake returned to perfect stillness, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The hands remained above the surface, motionless, silent, waiting. For a long moment, nothing moved at all. Then, in one synchronized motion, the hands sank. They slipped beneath the surface, as if dragged downward by invisible chains. One by one, wrists disappeared, then fingers, then the last pale fingertips vanished into the black water. The faces beneath dissolved into murky shadows. The lake healed itself within seconds, smoothing out until it looked untouched. Still, perfect, silent, as if nothing had ever happened. But the stain on the boat remained. A handprint pressed deep into the wood. Fingers stretched wide, too long, as if whatever made it had not been fully human. Water continued to leak from the mark. Not normal water, thicker, colder, dripping down slowly, each drop falling like the ticking of a clock. The sound echoed across the dock long after it should have faded. The mist began to drift away. The air warmed slightly. The forest behind the shoreline remained silent, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like it was watching. Beneath the lake surface, faint shapes drifted just out of sight, slow movements in the dark, circling, waiting, not dead, not gone, just deeper. And the water remained still, but somewhere below, something shifted, a slow, dragging motion through the darkness, a presence moving beneath the lakebed, disturbing the mud and rock. The surface trembled once, just once, a single ripple, small, gentle, almost unnoticeable, the same ripple that had started it all. And in that moment, it felt as though the lake was reminding the world of something important, that it remembered, that it always remembered. Every footstep on the dock, every boat that drifted too far out, every soul that leaned too close to the edge. Because Lake Motosu never forgot those it had taken, and sometimes it reached back for more. If you like these stories, like and subscribe.